Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, January 12th, 2021. To sort of take that carefully and make sure you get it right. And had to take time to make sure we got the mute button off correctly. So you missed the first 1/2 of a second of the show of me saying hello. Hey, is this thing on? Okay. Well, the Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. Why don't we start with my helpful information from Bill in Portland, Maine, who tells me that the show is live now. That tells me what to do at 9:01 a.m. on a weekday morning. What do we got on tap? Well, Kagro X, me, David Waldman, reports that the president is heading to the border today, sorta, kind of, yes, to officially present Mexico with the bill for the wall. It's about time. They're about 4 years late on paying for that one. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in the next period of time. 2 weeks. Very soon, very, very soon. There's not even 2 weeks left in his administration now, so we're at a good point in our proceedings. Lots to catch up on as usual. It is Tuesday, what we're calling on the show 25th Amendment Tuesday. Nothing will happen today with respect to actually triggering the 25th Amendment, but today the House will be in session for substantive business and voting late in the day. This is their usual Tuesday morning schedule, which really maybe they should have pushed forward just a little bit, but things are pretty crazy. I guess I'll just throw this out in the consideration of their timetable. A second Democratic member announces today, I think, perhaps this morning, perhaps she announced it last night, and it got through to, my fatigued brain just this morning. Pramila Jayapal announces that she is now COVID positive after sheltering with QAnon lunatic Marjorie Taylor Greene and other anti-masker idiot Republicans who were in that secure room during the siege. And you may have seen video footage of it being circulated in which another of the members is offering masks to those members who have arrived in this enclosed space in which they'll spend several hours together, who have arrived without masks in this space, and they refuse. Normally you say, the rote phrase is politely refuse, but nope, they don't, of course, politely refuse. They mock her for offering the masks, and they adamantly refuse, and they mumble to the camera about how they don't need a stupid mask, and the whole thing is a hoax anyway. And now, I guess at least one of them, although I suppose it could be somebody else, of course, who's COVID positive, but the risks of contracting it from unmasked people would, of course, be considerably higher than the risks of contracting it from unmasked people. I think, is there anything people can do about it? Not that much, although I actually do recommend that probably someone ought to bring a resolution to the floor censuring those members seen refusing and mocking masks on that video. I mean, it's a house rule that you're supposed to be masked in these places, and if they're violating the rules, they ought to be called out for it. The censure doesn't do that much. It doesn't kick them out of Congress, which is probably what they should really be doing with them, at least with Marjorie Taylor Greene, who ought never to have been seated because she's a QAnon lunatic to begin with. And I've said many times on Twitter anyway, if not on the show, that seating these people is a it opens the door to a slow motion assassination plot. Not only are they lunatics who believe that they've been sent to Washington to eliminate lizard people, cannibal, vampire pedophiles among their colleagues, but they insist that they will break all the rules in order to preserve the Second Amendment right to go about armed. Although I think at least Lauren Boebert is publicly, anyway, backing off of her insistence that she will defy all of those rules and laws of the District of Columbia. We have yet to see whether she'll drop her gun on the floor at some point and belie all of that. But reminder, just since I'm taking all sorts of tangents and doing this whole thing, stream of consciousness, that members of Congress, when they're recognized as such and are wearing their members' pins in particular, and they enter the Capitol, the world famous police force, the Capitol Police, are in charge of security there, and they typically, I think, I don't know whether it's a formal rule or not, but I would like to know where the practice is enshrined, and perhaps it's time to end the practice of allowing members to bypass security and even to bring guests in. I was reminded recently, I don't think I was entirely clear on that going into it, but it now jives with my recollection that if members are escorting guests into the Capitol complex, they can take their guests with them around security. Who do you think might be coming in as a guest of someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert or Paul Gosar, for that matter, who continues to tweet out vague and not so vague threats against all sorts of figures in the government and incoming into the government? Well, if they brought some of these weirdo militia types and they were armed and she took them around security and around the metal detectors, remember, of course, that members are each given an allotment of tickets that they can use themselves or give out to take people to attend in the usual course anyway, the inauguration. Perhaps in a non-COVID situation, it might have been more open. I don't know what they're planning to do. It's still no solid word on what they're planning to do with the inauguration, and they could easily be forgiven for moving it to a more secure location and just doing a much more subdued thing and avoiding the mass gathering. That would probably be a good idea in the middle of the pandemic, not to mention the security concerns. But of course, they also get an allotment of tickets to bring people to the State of the Union address. So it's entirely possible that a guest could be escorted in and taken into the chamber for the State of the Union address, and wow, you find out just a little bit too late they're armed. That would be most annoying, given the advanced notice that we've had about these people. Anyway, yes, I think they ought to bring a motion of censure against those members seen on videotape, if there is such a thing as videotape anymore, but seen on video refusing the masks. The censure resolution, again, doesn't do too much. They're called down to the well of the House and admonished by the Speaker to obey the damn rules from now on. And I think they lose their privilege of speaking on the floor during the day on which they're censured. So it's a nice symbolic gesture as well. And they probably ought to consider doing it. It is, just in case anyone is out there listening and has recently been elected to Congress, it's a motion of fairly high privilege. So you would be able to come down and offer it as a point of, or a question of the privileges of the House, and find yourself recognized, I think, fairly quickly, or have a time set for your recognition within 24 hours or so. And a fairly easy thing to get done, and I think you'd find a sympathetic ear in the chair in asking for that sort of recognition. Okay, so that's it for the advice on what to do with the non-maskers. Plenty of other things parked in pocket and strewn throughout the Twitter feed in the last day or so. It is Tuesday, so we are hoping to hear from Joan McCarter in the 10 o'clock hour. Plenty more to discuss about what's happening on the floor today and what is happening on the floor tomorrow with respect to impeachment. You never know whether Armando may decide there's another point we want to bring up and make sure we cover today. We'd have to do that during the first hour. I extended that invitation to him yesterday. So, Armando, if you're listening, you're welcome to chime in or send a note about what it is you want us to get around to if there's a point you think we're missing. Today, floor schedule 25th Amendment, as I mentioned, is under consideration. It will be a resolution calling on Vice President Pence to initiate his part in the 25th Amendment process. Again, if I'm correct, we're talking about Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, where essentially they're, and you know how I feel about the calling on construction. I think I've mentioned it a couple times. it's kind of like speaking from a position of weakness. I call on someone to resign, call on someone to make someone else resign. It doesn't usually happen. But hey, sometimes or whatever. There's some power in shaming somebody. Or in this case, they're going to be, the speaker had framed it as laying out a 24-hour ultimatum, essentially. That Pence had 24 hours to comply, essentially, and trigger the 25th Amendment. They've obviously been asking, they and many others have been asking for him to do that for a while, so he's aware of it by now. He still continues to say publicly that he has no intention of doing it. If this moves him to do it, great. If this is just coincidence, but he was going to do it anyway, great. If he is truthfully not intending to bring anything, not so great, but everybody kind of knew that and kind of baked it in at the beginning to this recipe. So what's going on? One, I don't know when they'll actually debate this thing. I think I have the notice in my email from the majority leader's office. They'll be convening at 9 o'clock this morning, which means now. Whether they'll be doing anything, I have no idea. But I guess they could be debating a rule for this resolution at some point today, even though I didn't see the Rules Committee meeting at all. So, maybe they'll be doing that now. There are no other routine speeches scheduled for right now. It says no 1 minutes where members can come down and give 1 minute speeches on any topic they desire. I think they're limiting that for a while. HRES 21 is the name of it's not a bill, but the resolution. Described briefly here, calling on Vice President Michael R. Pence to convene and mobilize the principal officers of the executive departments of the cabinet to activate Section 4 of the 25th Amendment to declare President Donald J. Trump incapable of executing the duties of his office and to immediately exercise powers as acting president. A resolution authored by Congressman Jamie Raskin from Maryland. And it says subject to a rule, so I imagine they'll have to come down and debate a rule for it as well. That'll occupy an hour. And we'll see how much time they give to debate for this item. And if they debate it during the day, I guess at that point they'll probably put the House in recess in between the end of the debate on both the rule and the resolution itself. And then they are, when they say predicted, I mean they're scheduling. First vote, that would be, I guess, actually probably the vote on the rule, so they probably won't even do the debate on the resolution. First vote at 7:30 p.m. to give members time to travel back to Washington, D.C. and get here in time. Last vote predicted at 10:30 tonight, so I guess all the action really will be at night. Why they're convening at 9, I don't know. But that gives you time, by the way, if you are insistent that the leadership is dragging its feet and that the impeachment resolution ought to have been introduced as soon as possible. Today would be as soon as possible. They will be convening at 9 a.m. with no legislative business ready until later in the evening. So you could march yourself to the floor if you're here and directly propose the impeachment to the President of the United States. But of course, you'd upset some people because they have a whole thing planned out and coordinated for tomorrow. But if you think, to hell with all of that, we need to do it my way and no other way, or there's no time to wait until tomorrow, it's already too late, you might say, you're free to go down to the floor and propose that immediately. They are, of course, free to tell you, well, you can't, we will schedule time for you to speak on it tomorrow. They can delay you for up to 24 hours. But, of course, they might also say to you, tomorrow we're already going to be debating articles of impeachment against the president anyway, so why don't you just wait for those and pitch in there instead of complicating the process now? And most members probably find that persuasive, and that's why you're not likely to see it. Anyway, we could spend some time investigating the actual wording of Raskin's resolution here. I don't know whether he's including in this resolution the no, I guess it wouldn't be, since it's just a resolution. I know he also has substantive legislation it would have to go through as a bill HR number rather than the HRES number, and establish a different body outside of the principal officers of the cabinet, etc., to independently make decisions about the fitness of the president under Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. Of course, right now that legislation is subject to Donald Trump's veto, so I doubt very much whether they actually intend to pass it and engross it and enroll it and send it to the desk of the president while Donald Trump still occupies that desk. Although they might think it was an interesting thing to do to send to him to have him veto it as one last stupid act of defiance, and they could always pass another similar bill later. They wouldn't have to worry about try a veto override if they have the numbers. That would be great as an embarrassment in the last couple days of Trump's administration. But I don't know if they do or not. It's difficult to tell whether they could get to 2/3 or not. I mean, this is as close as they're likely to get, but there are still some dead-ender Republicans who could prevent it from happening. I guess they could go that route, but they probably only want to do it if they think they have the numbers to win. But if they just drag the process out a little bit and slow walk the bill for another week or so, they'll be able to send it to President Biden instead and get it signed and enacted, and it'll be in place for the next lunatic president, I guess, should that ever happen again. Reminder here, Raskin actually has been pushing for this for a little while now. I don't know if it's something he advocated even before he was in Congress. It's possible. He's a constitutional law professor. He might have been talking about this before he was ever even elected. And it would have been good to have in place prior to Trump's administration. But certainly Trump highlighted the need for this for everybody. All right. So anyway, 25th Amendment action today, impeachment scheduled for tomorrow. And I see no meetings of the Rules Committee scheduled, but I imagine they will be convening something today. They don't always give that much advance notice of something like this if they want to move something very quickly. I imagine they'll need to set a rule for the debate of the impeachment resolutions just to keep a lid on things, and you'll see that move tomorrow. And then the question is what to do with it and when to send it to the Senate. I have another wrinkle to add to that timetable. I know that you're all familiar with the fact that the House engineered the dispatching of the articles of impeachment against President Trump over the Ukraine affair. You'll recall that there was a decision on the part of the Speaker to delay the dispatching of those articles and delivering those articles to the Senate so that they could control the timing of the beginning of the impeachment process. And there was some controversy, Republicans demanding that they be sent immediately or that the Senate just take notice of them and begin action on it. But no, they waited for those articles to be delivered. And so, a lot of people were calling for the same thing here. Let's delay sending the articles of impeachment over so that it arrives in a Senate in which the two newly elected senators from Georgia have been sworn in, and Vice President Harris has been sworn in and is presiding, or is available anyway, to preside from the chair as president of the Senate, so that we have a working majority at the time and Democrats can set the schedule for considering the impeachment resolution. Some people thought, and it's not universal agreement there, some people thought that it would be best to do it that way so that Democrats could control the schedule, thinking that if they were sent over early and the Senate, for whatever reason, agreed to reconvene early enough to actually take up consideration of the impeachment resolution before time ran out on the Trump administration, that is, if they came back today and they begin to consider it, rather than waiting for late in the day on the 19th with just under 24 hours to go until Trump was out of office anyway. If they came back and McConnell was majority leader and could schedule anything he wanted, and if he thought there was some advantage to locking in a cursory trial timetable that would allow very little time for Democrats or anybody else to make their case, and thereby engineering what he believed to be a quick acquittal. No one wanted, not everyone, but or not no one, I guess, but lots of people decided, well, maybe we should not take that risk. And so they were calling for the articles of impeachment either not to be voted on just yet, or if they're voted on, to be held in the House for a while. That, ticked off Republicans last time, but who cares? But maybe they don't want to do it again. I don't know, or at least not in the same fashion. So the new wrinkle is this. In reading the impeachment rules for the Senate, and I guess we should just call them up here so we can quote them verbatim. Senate impeachment rules were mostly the guideline for how they dealt with the first impeachment, and they stuck to it. First one, rule number 1 here, rules of procedure and practice in the Senate when sitting on impeachment trials. Whensoever, do you like that as a bit of legal language? Whensoever the Senate shall receive notice from the House of Representatives that managers are appointed on their part to conduct an impeachment against any person and are directed to carry articles of impeachment to the Senate, that's how they get dispatched there, the Secretary of the Senate shall immediately inform the House of Representatives that the Senate is ready to receive the managers for the purpose of exhibiting such articles of impeachment agreeably to such notice. In other words, there are, you may remember from the last time around, 2 stages to getting impeachment articles over to the Senate. I guess you could call it 3 stages. One would be passing articles of impeachment. But that, well, no, I guess that's 2 stages. Passing the articles of impeachment, it isn't automatic. The Senate can't just say, aha, we heard they passed it and begin to work. It's very old-fashioned, not just with impeachment, but with all bills and things that need bicameral action. The paperwork actually, you remember this, paperwork has to be carried over there. The Senate has to receive the papers from the House before it can start work. And you can, 1, delay the dispatching of the papers for various reasons. You also may remember that it can take, depending on how the rules you adopt for consideration of these things, there could be a separate vote on, and there usually is, a separate vote on appointing House managers to essentially conduct the prosecution of these articles of impeachment in the trial over in the Senate. So, important here, the rules say that the Senate's action on impeachment begins when they're notified that managers have been appointed. So, of course, you could have this vote on impeachment articles, adopt articles of impeachment, but simply delay appointing managers. And you can delay that until whenever you're ready, I suppose. And if you wanted to wait until the new Georgia senators were seated and Vice President Harris was presiding in the Senate, you could absolutely do that, and that would pretty much solve the timing issue. Yeah, so that's available. Just wanted to make sure everybody knew that. Those of you who are interested in delaying activity on impeachment until after these things happen, and perhaps also after Trump is out of office. So we discussed the advantages of that yesterday, and of course the possibilities of that yesterday. There is a federal judge out there, just in case you think it's only Dershowitz who thinks they have an argument against allowing an impeachment to go forward once Trump is out of office. I can't recall his name off the top of my head, but I did see Armando commenting on his Twitter commentary on the situation. It's wrong. He's got it wrong, where I think I feel confident saying he's a former federal judge, and I think a former federal judge on one of the circuit courts. Was it the 4th? Or he was talking like the 5th, but I think he might have been the 4th circuit at some point. Anyway, he had an argument that he put together in which he claimed that it would be impossible to go ahead with an impeachment against a president who has left office. It wasn't the strongest thing I've ever seen, that's for sure. And I think it was flat wrong in some places. And also just inapposite in some places. Perhaps I can dig that up. Anyway, when will those Georgia senators be seated, you might want to know. And I can't tell you for sure, but I imagine now would be a good time to remind you that Brad Raffensperger, and as much as he stood up to President Trump and others on Trump's side against pressures to essentially cheat and award Georgia's election and electoral votes to Trump, he is still very much a partisan Republican, though he may be reconsidering that at some point, I don't know. But he still remains a partisan Republican. Lots of people reporting that he was still as interested as ever in suppressing as much Democratic vote as possible in those runoffs. It didn't actually matter. But at any rate, he, in all likelihood, will take every minute allotted to him to delay the certification of the two new senators-elect from Georgia. And I guess he's got until about the 20th or so, I think I saw, to actually issue their certifications. The various counties in Georgia apparently have until the 15th, that much I remember, to certify the votes in their counties. And presumably he could argue pretty effectively that he can't certify the state vote until all the counties are in, but we should be bugging the laggard counties. Remember, unlike Donald Trump, both David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler have actually conceded their races. There's no counting left to do. They concede that the others have won. That certification can be put through today, but I guess it won't be, so we'll wait. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. How about this? I'll share with you this roll call article from yesterday describing where we stand with the Georgia stuff. Stephanie Aiken wrote this and posted it yesterday, noting that I guess... Well, I'll jump down a paragraph here that says, Georgia election officials told Roll Call Monday that the ballot counting is going smoothly and the state is on track to certify the Democrats' wins as early as January 20th, which is actually 2 days before the official deadline. I had a feeling that there might be an extra couple of days in that deadline, but the January 20th had been mentioned at some point. So... yes, and of course, January 20th, Inauguration Day, that would be when Kamala Harris would be first eligible to arrive in the Senate as Senate President, though I imagine, her desired schedule is probably something else for the rest of the 20th. But at any rate, could be that the certification is done as early as the 20th. How long it will take to transmit that certification securely to the Capitol and have it processed and recognized, I don't know, but perhaps that may take 2 days. At any rate, somewhere in the near future, probably just after Inauguration Day, we'll be back to 100 members in the Senate with the two newly elected members from Georgia seated. It says here that's earlier than political scientists and strategists on both sides of the aisle expected a week ago, when several said Loeffler and Perdue would almost certainly follow President Donald Trump's lead and attack the Capitol. But not that lead, but actually the lead to contest the results if they lost their runoffs. But I do think a lot of the wind came out of those sails after the 6th. But I think it looked like they were ready to concede pretty. Did they concede before then? At any rate, Loeffler changed her mind about opposing the certification of the Electoral College vote, certainly anyway. And then shortly thereafter, I registered, mentally the news that they had in fact conceded. Anyway, it says somebody else thinks the same thing here. I think the riots in the Capitol probably sped up the concessions. So I guess that's the answer. So they became more conventional. It said University of Georgia political scientist Charles Bullock. The victories of Warnock and Ossoff meant the Senate will be split 50-50, but Democrats will have majority control because Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will be able to break ties after her inauguration on January 20th. The Senate is not scheduled to be back in session and voting until January 19th. We discussed that yesterday. That's the major impediment to moving ahead with any sort of impeachment before Trump is out of office. It still appears to be the case that McConnell, though he is clearly distancing himself from Trump, and might even be favorably disposed toward impeaching him, he is still speaking as leader of the Republican Party in the Senate, and they are not unanimous or even close to unified on how to approach the question of impeachment, or at least they might be nearly unified on what to do and how to dispose of the impeachment by voting not guilty, of course. But it's not at all clear that they're all against even bringing it forward, but they're still probably mostly in favor of doing anything they can to delay or dispose of it without trial. Anyway, so they're not expected to be back until January 19th, and there's nothing anybody can do to force them to change their minds. And we discussed yesterday that no, it is not the fact of the matter that, even though it's circulating on Twitter, that Nancy Pelosi had anything to do with or made any concession to Mitch McConnell to allow the Senate to remain out of working session until the 19th. That's something they can do quite on their own. Anything else to get out of this article? I don't think so. Pretty much a recap of the events of last week. Oh, yes. There is this note. While Georgia is considering changing the way future elections are run, the rules for the runoff on January 5th were the same as they were on November 3rd. But I think we mentioned an article that on the show that predicted that Georgia Republicans would, if they lost these runoffs, change their elections rules once again. I think they have changed them before in the past, and that the runoff scheme was adopted at some point in reaction to probably a Democrat winning an election with a plurality but not a majority. And so they said, we should be able to pull off a win here. What we'll do is we'll impose a second round. If no candidate gets more than 50%, we'll have a runoff, and that brings us back to one more shot for the Republican to knock out the Democrat, particularly if there's a special election, as there was in the Warnock race, where there's what they call still, and maybe they'll rethink this name, a jungle primary, where everybody who wants in, no matter what party they are from, joins in one big primary, and the top two vote getters go forward. I don't know. Do they do that? That's the way they do things sometimes in other states, but I'm not clear on whether that was the case for sure in Georgia. But at any rate, the idea is that what they worry about, the Republicans in Georgia, is that this will happen, that Republicans will split the vote among themselves. As Doug Collins was running for the seat. So was Loeffler running to actually win election to the seat, and they could split the vote, and that might leave the field open for a Democrat to sneak around, even though they believe that under normal circumstances, the Republican would almost always win in a statewide race in Georgia. So they built in this extra layer of protection. In case a Democrat sneaks by in a splintered field, we'll make them face off one more time, one-on-one against a Republican, and that'll give us a chance, especially if it happens after the general election and everybody knows that this is a super important race. Then we'll motivate all our Republicans to come out and save the Senate. Well, that's how it's set up, and it didn't work, and Democrats came out and won that race. And so now they realize, oh, if we hadn't had this stupid runoff thing and it was simply still first past the post, or, whoever gets a plurality, with the highest number of votes wins. As I recall, Purdue, I don't remember exactly, but I think both Purdue and Loeffler did in fact garner the most votes in November's general election, but they didn't clear the 50% threshold, so they had to have the runoff. But if they had simply awarded the seat based on the plurality, those two seats would be Republican. So guess what? The Republican legislature in Georgia is now considering going back to the old system where they think they might actually be able to win again. I don't know. They did it last time and they missed. I mean, maybe this is for the best. They guess so terribly. They keep, stepping on rakes and electing Democrats every once in a while. It's a rare thing, but I'll take it. And now that Georgia's been organized to the extent that it has, thanks to the efforts of Stacey Abrams and others, maybe it doesn't really even matter. But I guess the next project is trying to fix things on the state legislative level and electing a representative body there. So good luck to them on that one. And we'll see if we can't help them out. All right. What other things do we need to jump to today? I think we've covered the impeachment situation for now. That should be good. Let's see. A couple other things we can probably cover. Let me borrow some inspiration from good friend of the show, Judy Vincent, posting over at Daily Kos. Is this your first diary over at Daily Kos? I think you may have created this account for this purpose. In case you're wondering, I have the diary of Surfer Mom. Judy is not the surfer. She cautions me as her kids are surfers. She's the mom, so that counts, and it's as good a handle as any, quite honestly. But she discovered something kind of disturbing yesterday that brings us back to a discussion of the attacks on the Capitol, which ought to occupy more of our time. You remember the zip tie dudes. There were at least two of them. Pardon me. Oh, and before I begin on this, one quick note. Yesterday I had wondered on the air whether it was the quick thinking and actions of Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman, I think I didn't know his name at the time, who had driven Zip Tie Guy and a couple others. I think I mistook the person next to him in the picture up in the gallery for his mom, because this person was very gingerly approaching the task of hopping over the handrail that separates the various sections of the galleries, whereas Zip Tie Guy was making a very athletic vault over the, athletic looking relatively over the hand railing, and this other person approaching things very gingerly. And I had noted, this person has got one of those Proud Boy orange hats on. And how did Mom, who I knew was with Zip Tie Guy at the attack, acquire one of these Proud Boy hats? Maybe he too has Proud Boy connections, and he very well may. Anyway, as it turns out, no, that wasn't Mom. But there was a face mask on the person and some loose and bulky clothing. Wasn't entirely clear who I was looking at here, but it was in fact somebody who I guess had come to this orange Proud Boy hat, if indeed that's what it was, on their own, which would just lead us to a different situation to poke fun at. One of the tough guy Proud Boys doing his best to tiptoe over this thing, whereas the other guy seemed to be quite fit and ready to vault over. Anyway, it wasn't Mom up there. She was elsewhere on the grounds, as it turns out. So I had thought that maybe Officer Goodman had... I saw video early on of what I thought was, and may very well have been, Goodman handling situations in the Capitol in which he was backing away from the protesters, but leading them. So, arguably could be leading them somewhere. We didn't know what he was doing at the time when we saw the first video. But in the first video, I saw him climbing a flight or two of stairs and being chased up the stairs by these attackers. It could be that it was another officer doing a similar thing elsewhere, or just retreating elsewhere. So I thought that he had led them up the stairs from the second floor to the third floor, and thereby led them to try and enter the Senate chamber from the third floor, which would leave them in the galleries and not with actual floor access. And that may yet have happened, or others may have made that mistake elsewhere without the help, quote unquote help, of Capitol police officers. Or in rethinking it, it may be that it's possible that Goodman wasn't posted on the second floor to begin with, but was in fact downstairs on the first floor or in the basement levels, and people entered that way, and he led them up those stairs at that point. Because I've seen subsequent video that indicates that their pursuit of Goodman ends on the second floor, just elsewhere in the opposite direction from this unguarded entrance. Instead, Goodman is on the radio with his colleagues and retreats along the second floor around a couple of corners, and they chase him around a couple of corners. And when they turn the last corner, they are confronted by backup. There are 3 or 4 other police there with their guns not drawn, but at the ready. Hands go up, and their attack ends there. I thought that had happened perhaps elsewhere, but no, that was on the second floor. So now I'm wondering whether maybe the video I saw was of him climbing the stairs from the second floor to the first floor, because the new video where it ends with the cops does show him at some point coming up the stairs to the second floor and then putting himself in front of the door. It may have been that he started there, then was called down the stairs to confront protesters, and then ran back up. But lots to sort out, and that's something that can be sorted out in the future. Perhaps, as Armando is spending his morning pointing out to people, all of this stuff can be investigated very thoroughly and at leisure if the impeachment resolution is not referred to committee, but is tried by committee in the Senate, as opposed to on the House floor, or rather the Senate floor. We'll probably get back to that maybe later in the show, and that will probably bring us to a good segue to discuss things with Joan. Let me now go to the other related tangent of the flex cuffs that the zip tie guys had. We mentioned yesterday that's the name of them, flex cuffs. They're things you'll see whenever police are handling mass disturbances, or as they sometimes call them, First Amendment events, if Republicans are doing them. But if they think they're going to have to do large numbers of arrests, and, cops carry one, and maybe they carry a spare pair of handcuffs, but not enough to arrest 15, 20, whatever number of people, as can sometimes happen at mass events. So they have these flex cuffs. They look like zip ties. They work like zip ties. They got 2 loops to them. They're just basically disposable handcuffs. Now, there was some question as to what were they doing? Why did they bring them with them? And where did they get them? Flex cuff or zip tie guy number 2, you'll recall, the Air Force veteran who was actually on the floor and started out on the floor of the Senate down below, also had some, and he claimed, I didn't bring them with me. I was, like the other guy, I was caught up in the moment, but I came in tactical gear. I was caught up in the moment, but I had zip ties. Where'd you get the zip ties? Oh, I didn't bring the zip ties. I wasn't prepared for this. I came in a Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops, but I found some tactical gear along the way. And then I found some of these flex cuffs. And I thought, why, these really are for the use of sworn police officers, not average Joe, idiot amateurs, wannabe people who want to effect citizens' arrests against members of Congress. I ought to turn these obviously lost pieces of police equipment over to my friends in law enforcement. Well, I doubt very much that was the case. But in case you were wondering well, where would somebody get such a thing? And maybe you weren't wondering. Maybe you knew all along or guessed right off the bat that I'll bet you can buy that stuff in surplus stores or on the internet. Well, I have an answer for you. Judy checked it out. Flex cuffs are too easy to buy, she says, as the title of her piece here at Daily Kos. And apparently they are. Here is a picture of the available items on Amazon, and they even make an Amazon's Choice for you, which maybe is something that was probably done by algorithm, but which they should reconsider, I think, over in the corporate offices, especially as they are only rated 4.5 stars. So quite honestly, you want to make a 5-star item into Amazon's Choice, but there's an Amazon's Choice for flex cuffs. Here they are. The brand is Yuan, YYUAN. Yes, I got that right the first time around. Suggests to me that they are perhaps made in China. I don't know. Flex cuffs, 10 pieces, heavy-duty zip tie handcuffs, restraint, disposable police nylon double cuffs with UV and heat resistant. That's the description suggests that it too was written in China. 250 pounds, tensile strength, available in black, although it says there are 2 colors. I haven't searched for them on Amazon myself, and I wonder what the other color is. Probably white, but it would be nice if they came in hot pink or something like that. Lots of different views you can have of the zip tie handcuffs, but I think you know what they're all about. How much do they cost? $13.99 for a pack of 10, or $1.40 a piece, in case you want to follow along with math at home. Available for Prime delivery, so terrific. They were available for delivery by Saturday, January 16th, when she took this picture, so you can still get in on the deal and come riot or arrest rioters yourself, though I recommend staying away from Washington, D.C. And they are openly planning to come back, in fact, this weekend, because, of course, they're all professionals and they work somewhere, and we should find out where. They want to come on the weekend, and then some of them that don't care about their jobs or whatever, or don't have any, or work for themselves, or are willing to risk it all, will plan to come back on the 20th. So there you have it. Judy's, though, says here, the caption of the picture, do you think military-grade flex cuffs are hard to find? Think again. You don't have to just be lucky and scoop them up abandoned off of, dropped around the Capitol by law enforcement officers, as Zip Tie 2 guy claims. I saw photos, she says, of the 2 domestic terrorists with flex cuffs in the Capitol on January 6th. If those 2 men had been able to reach the vice president, senators, speaker of the House, or representatives, there could have been disastrous consequences. I wondered how a civilian could even acquire flex cuffs. I thought maybe they're sold at some obscure tactical gear store or something. Because it does seem like if you're law enforcement, obviously you're going to have some of those things, but it seems like that should be equipment that they just sort of give you. Where'd you get these? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Here's what you need for today. It's not like they say, hey, everybody, there's a riot, or we expect there perhaps to be a disturbance. All you cops, like, they're not public school teachers, right? Go out and buy yourself some flex cuffs from Amazon so that you're prepared for work tomorrow, like we would do with teachers. You need paper, crayons, pencils, glue for your classroom. Better go buy it. Maybe we'll reimburse you. But no, but I guess police department acquisitions people, purchasing people, I guess might need to do this. And the fact that they would go to Amazon, well, I don't know. Anyway, so she did a quick Google search, and lo and behold, the first source that popped up was Amazon. And there were a lot of tactical gear stores selling them too. So, why is it so easy for a civilian to obtain flex cuffs? I can't imagine a single legitimate reason why any law-abiding civilian would need to buy these things. We weren't really thinking like 50 Shades of Grey or anything either, too. Like, I guess that's always possible, but I always thought they went with the things with the feathers on them. But, I don't have enough experience with that to tell you. But maybe it's part of the fantasy. Like, let's role play. I'll be an insurgent, anti-democratic activist, and you'll be the, impressionable young MAGA staffer. I don't know what you would do. Anyway, I can't imagine a single legitimate reason why a law-abiding civilian would need to buy these things. In my opinion, flex cuffs should only be in the hands of law enforcement and the military. Should a law be passed to stop the sale of flex cuffs to civilians? I don't know. I never considered it. I guess they could always just tie you up or bring regular handcuffs because you can still buy those things too. Although it would be a lot funnier, and maybe it would undermine the authority of insurgents if they were carrying pink feather, bondage handcuffs. They're not terribly dangerous in that they can be cut with scissors, or I guess heavy-duty scissors, or kitchen shears. Although, you shouldn't have to. I don't know. It won't be a super high priority, but it might be something that they could consider, and the Congress might actually stick into a bill somewhere, considering now the number of pictures of people having those things. They're rendered far more effective, I guess, by people carrying guns and saying, you will surrender to me putting you in these things or else I'll shoot you. But then again, if it's a right combination of people and protagonists and victims, you might not need a gun to force somebody into that. You just beat them up and whatever. And I guess the argument will be, what's the difference? What are you going to outlaw rope now too? But I've seen what they've done with rope at this insurrection the other day too. So it's worth considering, even if it would be highly impractical. I don't know if they'll get around to banning them, but it certainly could be something that gets tagged and traced in some way, like buying high volumes of nitrate fertilizers. Might be something you want to think about doing if it's being bought in bulk by civilians. So it's worth thinking about, and I thank you, Judy, for checking this out and raising our awareness of this thing. And we'll consider that, and I guess if we see more of them on the Capitol grounds starting on Saturday and running through next Wednesday, we'll probably see some increased interest in that. All right, let's see. I want to move on to a couple other items here before we hit the 10 o'clock hour. Yes. I mentioned yesterday in discussing some of the people who had been arrested already and some of the people who were arrested on the day of the unrest. I mentioned one such person who was arrested. What was her name? Christina? I can't remember the young girl's name, but I remember her mom's name. Malamon was the last name. Here we are. Christina Malamon. I have a thread from Andrew Kimmel, who is, let's see. Well, how does he describe himself? I produce things for TV and the web, founder and chief creative officer of auranexus.com, former head of live video at BuzzFeed News. So I guess has some background in these matters, I guess. Since we were hearing from Ben Smith and his background and on these things. Anyway, Andrew Kimmel was describing some of the people who had been arrested in all of this, and in so doing got around to Christina Malamon. We read the article about her arrest yesterday, but here's an extra tidbit or two. Christina Malamon, 28, and her mother were charged with curfew violation and unlawful entry. You may remember that. According to video posted on her Instagram, Malamon said she was born in Moldova. And again, was I misidentifying that by talking about the scourge of Moldova? Is that what are we talking about? Ghostbusters 2, right? Wasn't the bad guy? He was the scourge of something Central European to Central Asian, former Russian Soviet Republic or something. But anyway, maybe Moldova isn't it. Anyway, that's where her family, she had claimed, faced persecution under the Soviet-era regime for their Christian beliefs. There were such people, but few and far between. Maybe more in Moldova than in Russia proper, let's say. Malamon from Oregon, you remember that I was confused about, she seems to be active in an awful lot of places. What did we read about her yesterday? That she was in the Young Republicans Club of Oregon, that she was the head of it, right? Let me see if I can find her article. But that she was also doing something that had brought her all over the country to a lot of different spaces. And, oh, dang. All right, well, it's not as easily accessible as I was hoping for. But I named a couple of places where, gosh, that's not Oregon. Why is she so active there. Maybe she went to school there or something. But, well, I'll see if I can dig it up. Anyway, I'll put the two articles together for you to compare side by side. But one of the other places that she was active, apparently, was, as Kimmel says, Malaman was the primary organizer of a Trump boat parade. You remember those things. But the one that you remember, it's the one where big waves sank a smaller boat. And also served as a poll watcher in Georgia. That was it. Served as a poll watcher in Georgia and spoke at an event organized by the Trump campaign in December, claiming to have seen hacked voting machines and tabulation computers in Georgia. So she seems to be like a semi-professional fraudster for the Republicans. But Young Republicans head in Oregon, also connected with Turning Point USA, where Charlie Kirk is disavowing his involvement, trying to hide it. There's more on that, too. Going to add that before the break, possibly. And then finds yourself in Georgia as a poll watcher. Why are you a poll watcher in Georgia if you are not Georgian? That's one question I have for you. You could certainly bring in qualified people from out of state, but what are you qualified in? I'm not sure. You're from Oregon, and you're a, what, how old was she? 28? So... and she's head of Young Republicans and ambassador to Turning Point, which I thought was a college organization, college-based organization. And now she's also involved in organizing the Trump boat parade. Now, where was the Trump boat parade where those boats sank? And the answer to that one, I mean, unless it happened in some more places, was Texas. So I was just a little curious how this 28-year-old is organizing Trump boat parades in Texas, is a poll watcher in Georgia, and turns up at the insurrection in Washington, D.C. And who's paying for all of this? If not, I don't know. Well, we're not really sure. I guess Turning Point must be doing it. We'll have to look into their involvement. And her mom, of course, Yevgenia, also arrested and processed the other day, too. I'd be interested in looking at Charlie Kirk. I saw him. Someone was circulating a video of him, again, trying to disclaim fault, but also, hey, nothing really happened. This isn't an insurrection. Those people aren't terrorists. What did they do? They walked up the Capitol steps and into the rotunda. What's the problem? Walked up. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. Here on Netroots Radio, of course. We haven't moved in the last 1 minute or so. So I grabbed the tweet I saw circulating. It was John Whitehouse, Existential Fish, a good friend of the show, and or at least of the Twitter feed anyway. And I think probably has brought a good number of things to our attention that we've used on the show. He is news director at Media Matters for America. I guess I see his tweets often enough that I think of, good friend of ours on Twitter, which, we've never met and haven't done, I don't know, maybe we met at some point, perhaps at a Netroots Nation event or something like that. But yeah, you come to think of these people as your familiars, if not your personal friends. But in the days of pandemic and COVID, what's the difference? We're all together virtually anyway. He follows me, I follow him. We talk about his work on the show. My guess is, though, that he's not listening to the show because he's busy working for Media Matters for America. But, it would be a fun listen for him, I'm sure. He put this together, a side-by-side, well-edited video of Charlie Kirk essentially denying responsibility for this thing. You remember that he had claimed ahead of time that he had brought 80 buses of Turning Point USA activists to the rally, but then the rally turned into an attack on the Capitol, and so no, I didn't bring 80 buses of people, and really 80 buses is an awful lot to fill. Turning Point might have the numbers to do something like that, especially during a college break like right now. But 80 is an awful lot. I am not certain about that. And of course, it would cost a lot of money, but we don't know where he's funded from. There's a couple of good pieces of research that suggest that certain various Republican millionaires and billionaires are behind funding him, a lot of which he's just pocketing himself. But, oh yes, and that reminds me, almost forgot about this. There is some good news in all of this. Sheldon Adelson is dead. That's pretty good news. I mean, I'm not like cheering his death. I'm just saying his wife Miriam, is that right? Is that her name? I can't remember. Is in for a lot of money. I mean, I assume she had plenty as it is, but maybe now it all reverts to her personal control, and she can do all sorts of fun things with it, like helping orphans and whatnot. I'm sure that's on the agenda. Anyway, John has put together this nice side-by-side video. I say well-edited because he made the good choice to narrow the part of the screen that just needs to focus on Charlie Kirk and his stupid face, and widened the part of the screen that could show a larger part of the vicious assault. You've probably seen this video. We discussed it yesterday at it turns out to be, I think, one of the west facing entrances to the Capitol. This is the one where they're fighting their way up the stairs and beating police officers over the head with literally hockey sticks, flagpoles, iron rebar, it looks like, crutches as well. The crutches gives it away. You can tell you're at the right place if you see crutches flying. And the crowd has stolen riot shields from the police, and they're battering them with those. It's really crazy. And it's side by side because it's Charlie Kirk describing the events as benignly as possible. I think it might be worth listening to him do it, and maybe we can bring it up on the big computer so that you can all hear it. But whether it works or not, he's describing the events, which again you've likely seen video of, as what's the problem? There's nothing wrong, there's nothing illegal with climbing the Capitol steps and walking into the rotunda, which is not what they did. By the way, I also saw some very extended video from that west front entrance. That was also the one where later you may have seen video or still pictures of a Capitol Police or Metro Police, I'm not sure, police officer trapped in the doorway and getting crushed by the door being pushed by the crowds. And that video, the extended video that I saw, goes on for like 20 minutes of fighting at the doorway. And it was literally the Capitol Police, and this was a coronavirus nightmare. This is obviously going to be a super spreader event, not just for members of Congress who were sheltering together, but for the police and protesters who were crammed together like that. What ends up happening is the protesters are trying to push their way through the door, and they're just coming up in a massive wave. There's hundreds of people trying to force their way through the door. The Capitol Police respond, along with Metro Police, by filling the vestibule, essentially, between the outer doors and the inner doors right before you would normally get to the security checkpoint, and just filling the vestibule with Capitol Police bodies and making no room for protesters to enter. And the protesters simply try to push through them. But the police have shields, for one thing, and that helps. But then some of the protesters also have shields of their own or have stolen police shields and are pushing back with them. So it's two, big, broad surfaces pushing against one another instead of bodies. Police are doing everything they can to they're firing what appears to be fairly ineffective mace and, pepper spray over the heads of the police who are covered in are protected with helmets and face shields, and in some cases gas masks. But it had to be pretty uncomfortable and hot and sweaty and disgusting in there. Plus, they were all getting coronavirus for sure because they were jammed in literally as many bodies as you could get in this space. But they were pushing back and forth. The protesters at some point pushed through the doors and into the vestibule. The cops eventually pushed them back out. The protesters outside are organizing themselves bodily into like one big unit, like a battering ram, and organizing, with chanting a push to push through, and it almost works. It's extremely disturbing to have to watch. And then at some point, one of the officers gets crushed in one of the doors. At this point, Brian Sicknick has already been hit over the head with the fire extinguisher and is elsewhere suffering. Other members of the police force in the video that Kirk is describing as this peaceful protest are being viciously beaten on the ground. Let me play you the video. There's 30 seconds of this stuff.
All of a sudden to climb the Capitol steps and walk in the... Yeah, it's bad judgment all of a sudden to climb the Capitol steps and walk in the rotunda, and it's not wise. Okay? However, not wise does not mean you're an insurrectionist, okay?
Now, I'll pause it here because he has the most nervous laughter and smile, grimace really on his face while he's doing this, trying to excuse himself from any blame for the violence. I only brought 80 buses full of peaceful people. And then all they did was, as he says, let's see, we'll roll it again here.
An insurrectionist, okay? Let me be very clear. Just because you do something stupid does not mean you're Timothy McVeigh. Just
close.
Because you do something that is regrettable does not mean that you're planning an armed insurrection against the United States government.
Yes. So that's his claim. But he, of course, is, and there's lots of good writing that we should probably add to the record, and that will be a part of the record, hopefully, of the impeachment hearing as well, that establishes that there was such a plan. But he's doing everything he can to disassociate himself from the violence. Oh, it was stupid. It was ill-advised. It doesn't make you Timothy McVeigh. You all remember Timothy McVeigh, of course, the Oklahoma City bomber. By the way, in case you forgot anywhere along the line, fully 100% executed for that crime. I don't know that all of these crimes fit under a statute that has capital punishment hanging out there, but I guess it depends on how aggressively you charge some of these people. But there's definitely some serious jail time in the offing for some of them, although a lot of people are being undercharged for these things, even the ones who have been arrested already, like the guy who put his feet up on the office desk in Pelosi's office is apparently facing 1 year for that. But I guess until there's more proof of more destruction and what he might have done to get to that point, I don't know what else they can charge him with. But some of these insurrection laws that are on the books that I've examined carry some pretty heavy penalties. And, of course, treason, well, that one carries a death penalty. We'll see what other ones there are and whether anybody gets charged with the death of Brian Sicknick as well, and whether there's any felony murder charges extending from to others for being involved in or otherwise supporting the attack that ended up killing him. But Charlie Kirk is doing everything he can to disclaim responsibility and to claim that what's going on in this video is climbing the Capitol steps and walking into the rotunda. That's not going to fly. So great side-by-side by John Whitehouse, and brought us to a lot of discussion of what's available to see out there in terms of the video. I'll try and dig up everything I can to provide you with every opportunity to view the things, especially that longer video. And once again, I've left myself without a working pen to write that note, but part of what I need to write down is there, and maybe I'll recognize the chicken scratch later. Yeah, so let's see. Oh, yes, here's the article I looked up and found. Oh, thank you. Working pen. Oh, 4-color pen, just like I used to have in grade school. That's good. It's the old school Bic pen, the big fat blue one with the white top and the 4 clickable different colors at the top. This is very nostalgic. Thank you. Anyway, yeah, I also have the article. I think at this point I'll just share the article with you from the New York Times. At least 4 boats sink during Trump boat parade in Texas, officials say. That's my source for placing the sinkings in boat parades in Texas. There may have been other sinkings elsewhere, and if you've got that, please, by all means, forward me a link, and I'll include it, and we'll put it in a roundup at some point and tell everybody where else she might have been to sink boats. But this is a very intriguing case now, not just because she's Moldovan in origin, but I guess those Moldovans are just world travelers, and they crisscross the United States in political activism all the time. Maybe it's just tradition for them. I mentioned writing, pardon me, that should become part of the record in any impeachment proceedings. By the way, frog in the throat thing, I do feel a lot better these days with all the various treatments people have suggested. And so far, one of the more effective things is neti pot in the morning. I already had one, and I usually do it at night before going to sleep. If you don't know what it is, look it up on your own. Neti, neti pot. It's not fun to describe on the air, but a nasal rinse. I think this is chiefly. My mom, in diagnosing this, says probably post-nasal drip, as lots of people who have made other suggestions have suggested that it was. In fact, the Alkalol product came with the suggestion that it would be good for helping with that. And it's not something I had thought about because I always think about it as a nighttime thing for me. But morning, yes, could be happening as well now that you're upright and walking around. So the neti pot tends to do the trick, but it doesn't get it all. And I went with double alcohol and the neti pot today, plus Claritin, and there's still something there. But anyway, the writing I wanted to get on the record so that they can start investigating it. Ryan Grimm and Ida Chavez over at The Intercept have this headline: Freedom Caucus Chair Andy Biggs helped plan January 6th event, lead organizer says. Here, I imagine that this will lead us to the fact that he helped organize the January 6th gathering for, I'm sure he would think, peaceful protest at the Ellipse to hear the president speak. But guess what? It developed into something else. And I don't know, people came to this peaceful event to hear the president speak in tactical gear with zip ties and bludgeons. And tasers. And before I get any further on that, tasers. Yes, right. Zip tie guy number 1 was alleged to have a taser with him. Story was circulating in the last couple of days, which has since been discredited by Snopes, but was just so much fun that I thought I would repeat it anyway. And it actually has me thinking, I don't know, maybe Snopes is wrong about this. Has to do with one of the medical emergencies that ended in death on January 6th. But it was circulated, and quite honestly, in hindsight, it's so ridiculous that with a Snopes debunking, you gotta kind of land on the side of Snopes on this one just because of how ridiculous it was. One of the medical emergencies that ended in heart attack was alleged to have happened, to a, crazy gun nut dude who you can well believe might have come to the Capitol armed with a taser, if not one of his AR-15s. Apparently he had circulated a picture of himself at Christmas time, getting himself new Christmas guns, posing with his 2 new long black assault rifles in front of his Christmas tree, pageant of peace and all that. And actually he got more criticism for the ugliness of his Christmas tree than for the guns, as it turns out. He's a very weird looking, and I think artificial tree, but let's not dwell on that. Anyway, he showed up at the Capitol as a protester, allegedly armed with a taser, and then didn't come home because he had a heart attack. The story went like this: that he had been attempting to steal a portrait of Tip O'Neill off the walls of the Capitol. And I did hear the production team here discussing the other day, well, I can't even believe that there's a portrait of him. So they have portraits of all the old speakers. Each committee has portraits. They commission portraits of each chairperson as well. They feel like they should have official portraits like the president of the United States. The walls, where they're covered in them. A lot of them are all sort of the National Gallery too. Tip O'Neill, famous, one of the first well-known speakers in the general public, because I guess the TV era entered the chamber, C-SPAN, etc. Anyway, yeah, apparently his portrait was up on the wall, and the guy who died, you might imagine, was a relatively older person, probably recognized Tip O'Neill and recognized him as a Democrat and said, to hell with that guy, I'm going to steal the portrait. Or maybe I like Tip O'Neill and I'm going to steal that portrait. Anyway, the story allegedly was that he must have been holding his taser in his hand and didn't have a holster for it, as is sometimes the case with these nuts. And he needed his both hands free to get this portrait off the wall. And the story was that he held the taser between his legs, between his thighs, while figuring, just for a second, and I'll go get this portrait, so like Chinatown, I'll hold it between your knees, except a little bit higher. And he did. And in reaching up for it and then going up on your tiptoes, I guess, to get good leverage on, these pictures are pretty big, right? That would squeeze his thighs together. And the story was that it set off the taser. And he ended up tasing himself in a spot, no place you really want to get tasered. But that's the worst, I guess. You can imagine. So he apparently tased himself in the crotch. And of course, when you get tased, that sets off muscle spasms, and each spasm just set off another blast of the taser. And then the story was that he had tased himself in the balls repeatedly and until he had a heart attack and died. Now, the family is going to disclaim that story no matter what, really, even if it's true. So, whatever. But Snopes says, well, no, it's not really true that happened. And I don't know what they were relying on ultimately, but in the article they were quoting his wife saying, no, that's not how he died. Well, of course that his wife is not going to say, yes, he went to the Capitol unless he was getting a divorce. Yes, my stupid husband went to the Capitol and tased himself in the balls until he died. I admit it. So, I don't know. Snopes, I don't know if they had the best source on that one. But if they had, I don't know, the autopsy report, that would be something. But it didn't look like that. And I'll look up the Snopes thing. Note to self with my good working pen to go and get the Snopes thing. So, anyway, I was going to talk about how the Andy Biggs helped organize the January 6th event. And that some people came prepared to be hit over the head by police and not be injured. Others came prepared to tase themselves in the balls until they died. But then I figured out maybe he wasn't really prepared for that after all. So here's Ryan Grimm's article. We'll try and make short-ish work of it, but it looks to be a long and detailed piece, so I recommend it to you. In December, the subheader says, Ali Alexander, another guy who's recently been banned from Twitter, by the way, claimed he and 3 House Republicans were organizing the rally that led to a storming of the Capitol on January 6th. So there will be some culpability for other members of Congress, and as it turns out, I saw in earlier reporting, the attorneys general of both, I think, Georgia and Alabama, likewise, apparently lent their organizational skills and infrastructure and money to populating this rally. And I'm sure it will be their claim, and in court, it might even work, that I'm just bringing people to a speech, a rally by the president. What happens after that is not my fault, but as the evidence develops, we'll see whether or not that's really true. Here's what Ryan says. The head of the House Freedom Caucus, Ryan and Ada, I don't want to leave her out of this, Republican Andy Biggs of Arizona, one of the mouthiest of the objectors the other night too, helped plan the January 6th event that culminated in the storming of the Capitol. According to Ali Alexander, a lead organizer of the gathering, Alexander, a pro-Trump personality, was an early founder of the Stop the Steal movement and helped so-called, I should say, Stop the Steal movement. That's what they should call it. They just put it in scare quotes, but they should do so-called. And helped bring together various right-wing factions around a mass event on January 6th aimed to coincide with objections to the counting of the Electoral College votes. Alexander made his claim in 3 separate live streams in late December, adding that Representatives Paul Gosar of Arizona and Mo Brooks of Alabama were also involved. Almost certainly true. Gosar hasn't shut up about it and keeps antagonizing people. Mo Brooks, I don't know what he's been saying, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was doing something similar. Gosar, by the way, you'll recall, is the one whose siblings opposed his election to Congress and cut a commercial opposing his re-election as well. They, too, have also spoken up and asked that he be expelled from Congress now for his role in all of this. We're the 4 guys who came up with a January 6th event, Alexander said. So he loops himself into this. This is in December, before everybody knows how criminal it is. He wants to be associated with these 4 members of Congress. On December 8th, the Arizona Republican Party boosted Alexander, asking supporters if they were willing to give their lives, that's incriminating, in the fight over the results of the presidential election. Remember, too, that we we read you the story someone else had compiled of people who were writing, farewell letters to their loved ones as their way, were making their way to the Capitol. So in addition to showing up in all the tactical gear and with all the weapons, not to mention, I haven't even mentioned, again, as I should today, the bombs and guns and homemade napalm as well, apparently, now being reported. I didn't even know you could make it at home. I guess you can make anything at home. If you're crazy enough. But anyway, all of that there, and don't forget it, and you should mention it every day. Bombs, guns, tasers, bludgeons, all sorts of equipment, tactical gear, etc., and of course beating at least one police officer to death eventually. All of this really shouldn't be forgotten, and hold that up alongside the claims of peaceful events and climbing the Capitol steps and walking into the rotunda. Anyway, but right here in early December, they're asking people whether they would give their lives. Does that sound like you could now, should now be able to explain that away by saying, I was planning on a peaceful assembly to listen to the president? No, it doesn't. And by the way, you know what? I don't know. I'll read a little bit more of this, but we're getting towards the end of the half-hour segment here and I need to get ready for Joan. But his claim was buttressed by a fourth video from a December 19th rally at the Arizona State Capitol, at which Alexander played a video that Biggs had supplied. In the video, Biggs mentions Brooks as his ally in the fight. Gosar spoke in person at the event. Those videos are embedded in here. Biggs's connection to Alexander was reported on Sunday by the Arizona Republic, which quoted his spokesperson, Daniel Stefanski, denying any connection to Alexander. I guess after the fact, anyway. Congressman Biggs is not aware of hearing of or meeting Mr. Alexander at any point, let alone working with him to organize some part of a planned protest, Stefanski said. He did not have any contact with protesters or rioters, nor did he ever encourage or foster the rally or protests. My guess is that the rest of the article goes on to disprove some of that. Gosar and Brooks didn't respond to requests for inquiries. Brooks, after the event, sought to legitimize political violence in a radio interview. There you go. Alexander did not respond to texts or phone calls. Voicemail was full. Alexander, who adopted a new name, interestingly enough, after pleading guilty to felony property theft in 2007 and felony credit card abuse in 2008, has been suspended from Twitter, not banned, but suspended from Twitter and other platforms for his role in organizing the event. As the Daily Beast reported, he has said he has been unfairly blamed for the violence of January 6th and has gone underground. A lot of people being doxxed and threatened in the wake of all of this, which is something I do not offer an opinion on. How about that? Alexander's contemporaneous claims have taken on new relevance as House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has floated the possibility of expelling members of Congress who are found to have been involved in the riot. Your views on the 25th Amendment, 14th Amendment, Section 3, and impeachment are valued as we continue, she wrote to her colleagues over the weekend and rallying support for the impeachment movement. But yeah, you'll recall mention yesterday of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, just in case, I don't think we read it, but just in case you're not familiar. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress, or elector of president and vice president, or hold any office, civilian or military, under the United States or under any state, by the way, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States, any officer, or as a member of any state legislature, or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, if you've taken that oath as one of those people, and then shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. So a lot of discussion about that, especially with respect to members of Congress who may have helped organize this thing, or state legislators or others who have participated in the actual riot and violence, as the guy from West Virginia was found to have done. He has since been arrested and resigned from the West Virginia House of Delegates. Apparently also an article in Jezebel naming him as a well-known anti-abortion activist as well. So a bit of a past as a zealot and violent person. But remember, in this country, maybe things will change, but really, even until now, being a violent anti-abortion activist is still kind of an accepted thing in this country, which is really kind of dangerous and scary in its own right. All right, well, I'm going to leave off from this as we take our break and head into the last segment and get ready to speak to Joan if she is available. Lots more information here in the piece from The Intercept. I suspect, though, it doesn't get any further than saying that these members have had some connection with Ali Alexander and did organize the rally. And then the rest of it we have to kind of infer from the fact that people arrived at the rally ready to fight and having told their families that they might be killed in the events surrounding the 6th. And willful blindness to that, perhaps from members of Congress. I'm sure they'll be able to make a colorable claim that they had no idea that any of this was going to go on. But you don't have to prove it in a court of law necessarily to get yourself expelled by Congress. They have a very different standard. Whether they'll get to 2/3, I don't know. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is with us, calling in as always. Well, almost always. Sometimes you've maybe called from other places, I don't know. But from home in Boise, and Boise being state capital. I know, a lot of activity.
Boise.
Boise. Oh, really? Okay.
It's an S, not a Z.
All right. That's a good local pronunciation tip. I always appreciate those. So let me try that again. Or you give it to me again.
Boise.
Just Boise. But you're not changing the emphasis. It's just the S, not Z. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Got it. I mean, it's not spelled with a Z. I should be able to pronounce that. That's just, Americans should be able to do this. Boise. That's, okay. That's good.
It's like, for Westerners, it's like hearing Nevada.
Yeah, okay.
Or Oregon.
Which really we should change it to Nevada, quite honestly. But all right, they like to say Nevada.
I know, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, if you're local, you kind of get to say what you want. But I think at some point, maybe demographic shifts in the state might say, well, now we say Nevada rather than Nevada. And you're in the minority, and we'll tell people from outside of the state. But I don't know. There's something about state pride. Even
nobody gets to say Oregon, however.
Yeah. I'm better at that one. Although sometimes when speaking with my Eastern friends, I'll say that. But yeah, that's all right. So that's a good pronunciation tip. You pick them up all over the place. But you being in the state capital, there were a lot of reports following the activity on the 6th and even concurrent with it. But since then, people are showing up armed, as they had been doing previously over COVID, outside of their state capitals as well, and threatening to do the same as happened here. But has that not been the case?
Which, is just a weekend in Boise.
Okay, that's true. That does happen all the time with you.
They've shown up every single Saturday for I don't know how long, armed,
I guess,
outside the state capitol, complaining about
They're off from work.
the heavy boot of government on their necks when Boise has a mask mandate, but there isn't one statewide.
So they're protesting that.
So this is not new here. This week was a little scarier. They did show up yesterday because the legislature is in session now.
Okay. I was wondering why they're waiting for Saturdays, but that's just for other people who work on Saturdays. Like, you could leave any day. As a rancher, I guess you could take any day you want if you don't care about taking care of your ranch. But
I don't think very many of them are actually ranchers.
That must be it.
I mean, Bundy's not a rancher.
No. Well, yeah, not really anyway. Okay, so not Ammon. Ammon? Say
Ammon.
Ammon. Okay. All right. So anyway, routine, I guess, business as usual there, whether it changes this weekend when there are more protests scheduled for D.C.
I don't know. There was a very heavy police presence there yesterday.
Okay.
And there will continue to be a pretty heavy police presence, I think, because Idaho.
Yeah. Okay. You trust your police?
I'm I'm 12 blocks from the Capitol. I'm a little nervous about these things.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. And yeah, let us know if anything goes crazy. I don't know how easy it would be to assemble a crowd large enough to affect 12-block radius, but it could make for traffic problems, perhaps.
Yes.
We'll see.
So anyway,
yeah,
Idaho is
all right.
Getting ready for the worst, but we have a chicken shit governor who's not going to try to protest them, so they probably won't get too riled up here.
Okay, so they can come out and be placated with a speech, perhaps.
Yeah.
Which honestly, at this point, might be, depending on the content of the speech, if it placates them, might be well advised. If it placates them by saying, "Don't attack me, go to Washington and attack them," although then they would probably head west because that's what they think Washington means. So maybe that's not so bad an idea. So we should send Officer Goodman there to give the speech and misdirect them. Well, anyway, I hope things stay calm there. I note for the record, in Michigan, where they've had a number of problems, particularly at the state house, up to and including plots to kidnap and assassinate the governor, Michigan has banned open carry of firearms inside the Capitol complex. That was not against the rules before because guns were awesome before, but now they're scary and terrible, and they've banned open carry, and now they'll just have open carry protests there on top of all of it. But, if people are there to sack the Capitol, they'll probably be willing to break that rule. But it was an important acknowledgement that maybe this was a dumb thing to concede to our gun nut friends. So that's some progress.
Yeah, if you're smart enough.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen in Idaho. It's open carry everywhere in Idaho. I even believe in daycare centers.
Well, kids need to protect themselves.
That might be an exaggeration. I think that perhaps it
could be against the rules. It might be.
I think it could be against the rules for actual children, being around children.
All right.
You can do it on a college campus. Okay. That's fine.
Sure.
And shoot yourself in the foot.
Or anything that that you might happen to have.
Remember that one? Remember that early gun fail?
Yes, Idaho
professor in Idaho.
Yes, and how do you pronounce the? Is it not Pocatello? Or is it some weird?
It's Pocatello.
Okay, just checking. Yes. I mean, I'm like, I don't know. They're going to yell at me and tell me it's Pocatello or something. Which maybe it is. I don't know. It could be Indian pronunciation for all I know. But okay, Pocatello. We'll go with that one. One of the early adopters of campus rules allowing them to carry weapons, and shot himself in the foot during class. Which, probably just, if you're trying to establish the authority with the students, just not good.
not effective.
Yeah, I mean, just not on my list. To shoot them in the feet, that'll teach them, but you'll probably lose your job. Anyway.
Anyway, that's the report from Idaho.
Good.
I know everybody just waits on tenterhooks until Tuesday when they can find out what's happening in Idaho.
Yeah, I do. So, that's just because you never know what's going on.
Well, we also have the internet provider up in North Idaho to a vast swath of rural areas that has decided that they're going to censor Twitter and Facebook because of censorship. But that didn't work because they bleed over into Washington State, and Washington State has net neutrality, so they can't do that there. So they had to revise their plan.
All right.
And just offer their customers the ability to opt in to protesting censorship by Facebook and Twitter by censoring Facebook and Twitter.
That sounds like the sort of thing that they would do, and then not well thought out, and logistics didn't work. And okay, so I don't know. I always think I think it is extraordinarily valuable in a way to check in on what's happening locally in Idaho, because it's probably happening elsewhere, for one thing, as well, and illustrates good stories for the way people will overreact to things everywhere. And,
I think so, probably.
Yeah,
I mean, I hate to think of Idaho as setting an example or being,
well, you're just
an example of what's happening in the country, but clearly it is, having seen what happened on the Capitol. I mean, we started that here. The banging on chamber doors, breaking glass, forcing your way into a legislative chamber. I think
you might have been the first.
Idaho was the first to go that far.
Well, we should probably keep. One day, I'm sure there are good researchers working on this stuff, compiling the timeline, because we are all being reminded this didn't come from nowhere. This has a long pedigree among the right, and you should remember that and be clear about it. And I think some of the authors who spend their time on this probably will be documenting a lot of that, and they ought to speak to you guys there in Boise about whether it started there and document how far back it goes. Because a lot of people apparently just waking up to like QAnon as being a thing, which is amazing, especially when one of them is like Maggie Haberman. But I'm not 100% sure she'd never heard of it, but I guess she was astonished to find out that they took a lead in invading the Capitol. And I don't know how you could have guessed that they wouldn't, but a lot of people waking up to that. A lot of people waking up to the fact that we've now ceded two QAnon adherents, at least. Two of them are new. There may be more new ones, but there may have been more that aren't new who have become QAnon adherents while serving as members of Congress. But at least one of them among the several caught on video not accepting masks in the shelter area, which has now led to at least 2 infections among Democrats, of course. I don't know whether Republicans they can't be immune from it. They just must not be admitting that they have COVID-19 yet.
Or not getting tested.
Yeah, that could be it. You're right.
Waiting until they get sick to get tested. I don't know. Clearly, there were some who have not been tested.
Yeah.
Or have and know they have it and are keeping mum because they don't give a damn.
That's what I worry about, but could be. And they all are supposed to be able to have now access to early vaccination through the Office of the Attending Physician, which I know ticked off a lot of people. But even last week I was saying, it might not be a bad idea. They're all going to have to get together again, even just to vote for new rules that say they don't have to get together anymore.
Right, and that was before impeachment.
Yeah, and now they'll have to be there. And, of course, the other day, they all had to shelter together, and I imagine at least some of them had gotten one shot, and so hopefully that keeps a lid on things. And I don't know whether the QAnon people are going to accept shots or not, but whatever. Anyways, I feel maybe a bunch of us feel differently about having vaccinated them early after all. But there are other items on the agenda, of course. Today is
a lot of items on the
agenda.
Today, the House yesterday, Steny Hoyer offered unanimous consent in the pro forma session to start the 25th Amendment ball rolling.
Yes.
Which they knew was going to fail because it was unanimous consent pro forma session.
Right.
This is a resolution basically directing Pence to start the 25th Amendment process to get rid of Trump. Which they know he's not going to do. But they will officially vote on that this evening at 7:30 Eastern Time. Mm-hmm. It will pass. Pence won't do it, so tomorrow they will vote on impeachment.
Right. Okay. We got that schedule correct. I mean, that's all it is today. Is there I didn't see on the schedule any consideration of the legislation on the 25th Amendment to set up an independent commission of some sort to invoke it, but maybe they're just saving that for later. It's not going to change anything now. They might be
saving it for later. I think they may have just decided to set that aside and not do it.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes some sense. This president won't sign it anyway. Next one might, but it can't change events on the ground. Neither can this resolution really, but at least you can put it out there and say, look, the call is out there, and if Pence wants to refuse it, then he's not doing his job.
If you're dotting your I's, crossing your T's, this is probably the way to do it. It's not as fast as we would like to see it happen. Yeah. On the other hand, there's certain value in having let a week go by, in that the news that we're getting is so much more horrifying.
I think you're right.
How bad it was is starting to really sink in with people.
This seems to be the silver lining of the delay.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I was thinking about that yesterday. Was Jonathan Turley, who everybody is tired of, saying, snap impeachment might be ill-advised, and et cetera, dumb argument or whatever. But I was thinking maybe a snap impeachment is actually Trump's best hope of escaping unscathed, because with every day's delay, we're finding out more information and turning up not only more horrible things happening, but more connections between people who really ought to be worried about legal repercussions. Phone records and texts saying things that you shouldn't be saying in the aftermath of these
like
events. The
Arizona Congress people.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Biggs and Gosar in particular.
Yes. The 139 members of the House and 8 senators who actually, after they were attacked, after they heard people chanting, "Hang Mike Pence,"
yes,
went ahead and voted to throw out the election. It's remarkable to me. It shouldn't be, but 139 of them said, 147 total said, yeah, okay.
Yeah, afterwards.
After they were attacked. They walked through halls with shattered glass, with human waste scattered about, with it's mind-boggling.
Yeah. I don't know. And they may not have necessarily known at that moment, I don't know if it would change any votes, or certainly not all of them, how bad things had been. It might have been interesting if they had not had to take care of the business of certifying the Electoral College that day. If they had to wait a week for that, I wonder whether votes would have changed. It changed votes in the Senate. The House is a much different thing, but I did hear reports, and maybe you heard them too, that there were some members who actually didn't really want to vote that way, but they actually felt pressure to vote with the protesters and with Trump out of fear that their families would be targeted if they didn't.
That's the story, yes.
Yeah. But that's a story that ought to be developed both journalistically and really in hearings over this impeachment, whether that's hearings on the House side or trial on the Senate side. I'd like to know, because it'd be pretty important to know if members of Congress are changing their votes because of external threats. You would want to track down who's issuing those threats. That's huge.
It would be important to know that, yeah.
Yeah.
And chances that we have these hearings after the fact, I think, are probably pretty good. I hope.
You would think. I mean, there were, after all, more deaths than Benghazi, and you saw how you had to have hearings forever on that.
Yeah.
And this one had an actual stand-down order. So, we might want to know who issued it. So
there is, I think, I don't know whether it's a result of the pressure from corporate America saying, sorry, we're not going to fund you for the next cycle.
Yes.
Or in some cases, forever.
Oh,
or
great.
The gravity of the situation finally sinking in with them. Republican leadership is not going to whip against tomorrow's vote.
Aha. Okay.
Which is sort of significant, saying vote your conscience. And I think that's a Liz Cheney win.
Okay.
I hate giving any credit at all to a Cheney.
You bet.
And we know she's only
Kyle
doing it
Cheney's
because she believes that she can be the heir of the Republican Party once the ridiculousness stops.
Right. And she may
but
be right.
She's been pushing very hard against Trump.
Well, good. I guess, yeah, I'm with you on that. It's hard to praise her for it, but you got to take it where you can, I suppose. All right, so that's a good substantive difference in the way they'll approach things tomorrow. And I'm sure McCarthy, Scalise, and others actually probably relieved not to have to whip this vote. I did see a report that Trump was not particularly disturbed about it either, that he wouldn't be fighting aggressively against it. But I also did see Maggie Haberman again report that the news of the impeachment didn't bother him, but the news that his club was being stripped of the 2022 PGA Championship sent him into a rage. That's money.
That's what they say. Also, as Josh Marshall pointed out earlier on Twitter, he's not on speaking terms with his White House counsel. So,
okay.
So, it's going to be kind of hard to mount a defense.
Yeah. He's not on speaking terms with anybody, as from various reports, including Pence. And, someone else was reporting, and that maybe Haberman too. She's got the access, so she is giving us these tidbits. There's some balancing act here to be performed. But somebody says that Pence's chief of staff was at some point, because he was advising Pence not to overturn the election results, declared persona non grata. Well, we put those words in Trump's mouth. He doesn't know those words. He banned him from the White House. I don't want that guy ever to enter the White House again for the next 2 weeks. And he issued this edict to staff, and staff were like, whatever. So when Pence showed up, he had his chief of staff with him, and nobody stopped him because,
Well, but apparently nobody stopped short from being there for the past however long since Trump banned him.
Yeah.
Nobody enforced it, so he just shows up every day anyway.
Yeah, so there are some people who, there's some hope. They are ignoring his so-called orders when they are at least stupid and easy to ignore. We'll see whether, more difficult to ignore orders get ignored for the good of the country at any point. But, so he's not speaking to anybody. He doesn't seem to care about the impeachment. I guess he knows. I guess that's his acknowledgement that I'm out of here soon anyway.
He did actually. I'm just seeing he spoke this morning. I'm not sure to whom, but he did speak this morning. He said,
Trump.
For Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to continue on this path, I think it's causing tremendous danger to our country, and it's causing tremendous anger. I want no violence.
Oh.
I mean, that genie's out of the bottle, whether he said that today or not. There's going to be further violence, but now he's once again targeting Pelosi and Schumer.
Okay. That's not so great.
He also tells the press pool, people thought what I said was totally appropriate when he sicked the rioters off onto the Capitol.
Yeah, well, it wasn't.
It's been analyzed, and people thought that what I said was totally appropriate.
Okay, it's been analyzed. When you said it that way, it sounded like you said it's been analyzed. Like he been analyzed the whole place. Yeah. That's just his perfect phone call rhetoric, claiming he's not in trouble.
Analyzed by many people.
Oh, yes. Many very powerful, major people, I'm sure. Another one of these claims. It has been analyzed by a lot of people, and he's actually in quite a lot of trouble. And his White House counsel analyzed it and said, you might be in legal trouble. But he's just saying the opposite because that's what he does. I did note the other day, I don't know if we got to a full reading of it, but one of the actual insurrection statutes that's actually on the books, written in archaic language, as many insurrection, rebellion, sedition statutes are, but written as if predicting what he actually did at the rally, which is kind of amazing. Phrasing you never see anymore, but, one of those, whosoever kind of things, incites violence. But one of the phrases was with respect to rebellions and insurrections, whosoever sets on foot a rebellion against the United States, back in the days when that meant starting an army marching. But that's actually precisely
actually
what he
happened.
did. I mean, it's like they knew what he was going to be doing. So it might not be that easy to wiggle out of. They had a crowd assembled that was riled up and angry, and he said, let's march to the Capitol and go stop this thing. And they did. That's setting on foot an insurrection.
Was the agenda.
Yeah, that was right on the agenda. The
rule of law, I can't remember, Rule of Law Protection Association, whatever it was, the dark money group set up by the Republican Attorneys General Association.
Yeah, okay.
The Republican Attorneys General Association organized for this rally.
A lot of people.
They advertised for it. They sent out a robocall saying, this is happening on January 6th, and at 1 o'clock, we're going to march on the Capitol.
Yeah.
In the call.
So the march is scheduled.
The march is scheduled.
Easy to guess, but yeah. And then people brought weapons and tactical gear to it, and no one knows why. But
no one knows.
Yeah,
Gosh,
that's the important part.
What a shock that this turned violent.
Yeah. Here we are facing this possibility of impeachment. Trial perhaps not to start, though, until he's out of office. We've all learned by now that it's perfectly appropriate to impeach officers who have left office. So they cannot duck impeachment. I guess the only hair to split is there's precedent for not allowing people to duck impeachment by resignation, but there's not necessarily any precedent of people ducking impeachment by losing and leaving office. So that, I guess, stands in the way, possibly stands in the way.
I'm unclear now. Clyburn had floated over the weekend the idea of not sending it over for 100 days so that Biden could get other stuff done. That got shot down pretty much by everybody.
Good, okay. Yeah, that's
including
not necessary.
Hoyer and Schiff, and I think the sentiment of the entire Democratic caucus of the House saying no.
Okay. Well,
so now on the Senate side, they're exploring how they can do this. Schumer is looking at a parallel process where a committee considers the impeachment.
Yes. Good. He should be looking at that.
So there's precedent, apparently, not with presidential impeachment, but with judiciary impeachments, there's precedent for setting it aside to a special committee so that other things can continue.
Yep.
And I think that's probably how it's going to proceed.
Good. Yeah, there were some other suggestions out there about bifurcating the days, which can be done, I think, if they push it. But
executive session versus normal. You know the words.
Yeah.
Guy.
Yeah, there's technical words out there for that. Greg Sargent put together a piece on the various other options that he'd gathered up from speaking to people. Apparently, I don't know if this is like a secret or anything, but apparently he was interested in including the possibility of sending the whole thing to committee, but he didn't have, he didn't hear back from people who were authoritative enough for his editors to include that in his first round. What that means is I'm not authoritative enough. But, we understand that he was trying to, but I did give him some ideas for sources that would be authoritative enough, and maybe we'll see the reporting change. It seems to be driving a lot of the decision making when you get good coverage of what your options are. But
yes, it does help. And there is the advantage that's sort of frustrating sometimes that a lot of times in the Senate, when you have the majority, you can kind of make up some of the rules as you go along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they will have that, but not until after the 20th at the earliest, depending on, I guess they could drag their feet down in Georgia for 2 more days. But
they could.
We'll see. But that's not a terrible imposition. But they'll have this process underway. There's other ways they can delay things. Of course, you remember last time they didn't send the articles of impeachment right away. So they could try that. It doesn't have to be 100 days. It could be 10 if necessary. By the time we speak next week, the president could have been impeached. We'll see about when the trial starts. Or there could be no United States of America. So,
Which might affect whether or not we talk on Tuesday, but
could be.
Let's hope for the best.
Right, and we hope that your internet service provider doesn't block Skype, and if that happens, we'll figure out a way around it best we can. Thank you, Joan. It'll be a busy day later in the evening. Do you have to cover the evening's activities?
I imagine I probably do, yes.
Okay, well, have a couple cups of coffee on us. And,
I will do.
Yeah, I don't know how it'll be on us, but I don't know. Venmo? Do you have Venmo?
We'll talk about it tomorrow. Who knows? I could come back.
Okay, yeah. Oh, that would be exciting for everybody, and I hope in a good way. I appreciate your coming by today. Good luck and stay safe in Boise, and thanks for the tip. And we'll talk to you
next soon.
Yeah, next week, even if it's from another country. All right, stay tuned. You know what's coming next. I'll tell you more about what Justice has on tap after this brief
From
interruption.
networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
What could possibly be left? Well, he's on the Michigan story about open carrying the state capitol. The Mississippi governor signed a law to fly the state flag without the rebel battle emblem. That's good news. And the FBI probing a Russian-linked postcard sent to the FireEye CEO after the cybersecurity firm caught him red-handed. Stay tuned.